Nikola Tesla is one of the greatest scientific minds of all time.
Without Tesla's invention of alternating current technology, it would be a much darker and quieter world.
In the early 1900s, in a quiet place called Shoreham on Long Island, America, Nikola Tesla was building something that hardly anyone at that time could understand what it was actually meant for. There stood a huge tower about 187 feet high with a large copper-covered dome on top. From a distance, it looked like some strange industrial building. Most people thought Tesla was here simply experimenting with some new form of wireless communication. But this is where the story gets interesting. Because Tesla's idea was not just about sending messages. He was dreaming of sending electricity over long distances without wires. And if this really became possible, it could have changed the entire electricity system of that time and the business connected to it. Then came one night in 1903. It is said that on that night, the tower was run at its full capacity for the first time. Suddenly, lights appeared in some distant buildings, the gauges of the machines started going out of control, and Tesla himself had to shut the system down. But the real question is, what exactly did Tesla see that night, after which this entire project suddenly came to a stop? And to find the answer to this question, stay with us until the end of the video, because the story ahead might surprise you. Before moving ahead in the video, subscribe to the channel so that you can watch such videos first. So, first, let's understand what exactly Tesla was building at Wardenclyffe. Around 1900, there was a quiet place called Shoreham on Long Island, America. It was here that Nikola Tesla started building a tower that looked very strange in itself at that time. It was about 187 feet high, and its structure was made of wood. At the very top of the tower was a large dome covered with copper. From a distance, it did not look like an ordinary tower at all. It looked as if someone had built a very large and strange industrial building near the sea. For most people passing by at that time, it was simply another one of Tesla's strange experiments. After all, Tesla had already done many things before, that which made people wonder what exactly he was trying to do. But Tesla's way of thinking was a little different from other inventors. Before building something, he would run it several times in his mind. How the machine would look, how each part of it would work, and what the result would be if changes were made in it. All of this he would imagine beforehand. For him, the model created in his mind was not just an imagination, but something like a real machine. This was the very thing that made him different from inventors like Thomas Edison. Edison's method was more practical. He would build something, test it, make changes if there was a mistake, and then try again. In other words, reaching the right result through trial and error. Tesla's method was quite different compared to this. He would first try to create the complete picture in his mind and then bring it into the real world. Interestingly, Tesla had once worked with Edison himself. For some time in the 1880s, he was associated with Edison's company. But there was a big difference between the two in their way of working and their methods. Eventually, they separated, and later, professional bitterness could also be seen between them. But Wardenclyffe was not just another example of Tesla's way of thinking. Looking at this tower, people thought that the dome they could see on top would be its most important part. But the real story was something else. Because the most important thing about Wardenclyffe was not at the top of the tower. The real mystery was hidden underneath it. Now the question comes, where did Tesla get the money for such a huge project? The name behind it was J.P. Morgan. At that time, Morgan was counted among the most powerful and influential financiers in America. His money and influence were involved in many major businesses, from railroads to the steel industry. Even in 1895, when the U.S. Treasury was caught in a financial crisis, Morgan had played a major role in helping the government. So when Morgan invested money in a project, it was taken quite seriously. For Wardenclyffe, he also invested around $150,000. At that time, this was a very large amount, and by today's standards, its value can be considered equal to several $1,000,000. But what was Morgan told? He was told that Tesla was building a wireless telegraphy system through which messages could be sent without any wires. At that time, this itself was a huge technological achievement, because at the same time, Guglielmo Marconi in Europe was also rapidly working on wireless communication. In December 1901, Marconi claimed that he had sent the English letter S in Morse code across the Atlantic Ocean. After this, the race for wireless communication became even faster. For America, getting ahead of Europe could have been a major strategic advantage. That is why Morgan may have seen Tesla's project as a smart investment. But this is where the biggest twist in the story comes. Tesla's plan was not just about sending messages. His bigger dream was that electricity could also be sent from one place to another without wires. His idea was that the Earth and the atmosphere around it could help carry this energy, and if a receiver was tuned to the right frequency, it could capture that energy. In other words, what Tesla was thinking about was not just wireless communication, it was something far beyond that. Morgan was investing money for a communication tower, but inside Tesla's mind, there was a dream of sending energy wirelessly across the entire world. Until now, we had looked at the tower from above, but the real story may have started underneath it. Under the Wardenclyffe Tower, a system of tunnels and chambers built underground was prepared. At first glance, a worker might think that all of this was made to strengthen the tower or support its weight. But according to Tesla's idea, their purpose was much more important than that. Iron pipes were installed underground, reaching down toward the water table. Tesla believed that this could create a strong electrical connection with the ground. He understood it as a kind of electrical grip. Now, understand this in a very simple way. The tower was only the upper part. This entire network placed underground was its second part. And in Tesla's idea, the Earth and the atmosphere between these two could work together like a huge electrical circuit. He believed that if energy was put into this system at a certain frequency, it could come into resonance with the Earth's natural electrical field. In simple words, just like pushing a swing at the right time makes its movement increase, Tesla hoped that giving energy at the right frequency could make the electrical effect spread over a long distance, and if there was a receiver somewhere properly tuned to the same frequency, it could capture that energy. So the whole system in Tesla's mind was something like this: tower above, grounding network below, and between them, the Earth and atmosphere acting as a huge electrical circuit. It may sound strange today, but Tesla was not simply treating this as an imagination, because before this, he had already carried out some experiments in Colorado that had made his belief in this idea even stronger. And that is where the real beginning of Wardenclyffe's biggest experiment takes place. Before building Wardenclyffe, Tesla had already carried out experiments at another place that made his whole idea much stronger. The year was 1899. Tesla arrived in Colorado Springs, America, and there he set up a special kind of lab. His purpose here was not just to produce electricity. He wanted to understand what kind of connection could be created between electricity and the Earth using very high voltage and the right frequency. During these experiments, Tesla produced very large electrical discharges. According to his records and claims, artificial electrical arcs more than 100 feet long could be seen there. He also claimed that in some experiments, the effect of electrical energy was seen wirelessly several miles away. This is where something interesting came up for Tesla. He felt that the reaction was not happening only inside his machine, but that the Earth was also reacting with the oscillator. According to him, there could be some natural electrical resonances in the Earth. In other words, there could be certain frequencies at which a stronger reaction could be created between the Earth and electricity. If this idea of his was correct, then the Earth was not just ground. It could work like a medium through which electrical energy could be sent over long distances. This is where a direct connection between Colorado Springs and Wardenclyffe is formed. Colorado Springs was a place for Tesla to test his experiments and ideas. while Wardenclyffe was an attempt to use that same idea on a much larger scale. During this time, a young female assistant who worked with Tesla also described some early tests. According to her, during some low-power experiments, a few bulbs placed quite far away from the tower appeared to light up without any normal electrical connection. These claims have their own limitations and questions, but if these observations from that time were correct, then Wardenclyffe was not just a communication tower. Tesla may have been trying to build something that could free electricity from wires. Now, just imagine, if Tesla's idea had really worked on a large scale, its impact would not have been limited to the technology of producing electricity. At that time, copper wires, transformers, and complete power lines had to be installed to bring electricity to cities and homes. Infrastructure had to be built everywhere, and then people were charged according to their electricity usage. But if electricity could be sent wirelessly over long distances, then the question would not be only about technology. Then, how would a meter be installed? How would people be charged according to kilowatt hours? And if one tower could send energy over a very large area, how much need would there be for so many wires and transformer stations? In other words, Tesla's dream was not just a new way of delivering electricity. If it succeeded on a large scale, it could have challenged the entire business model of the electricity system that was being built at that time. And this is where the question of J.P. Morgan comes up again. The project Morgan was investing in was mainly a wireless communication project for him, but Tesla's thinking appeared to go much further than that. By 1903, the pressure on Tesla to work within the limits of his supporters and keep the project more practical was increasing. But Tesla was not ready to step back from his idea. For him, this was not just an investor's project. He saw it as a new system for the whole world. This is where three things come together for the first time in the story: technology, money, and control. And then came the year 1903. It is said that one night, Tesla decided that it was time to run the system at its full capacity and see what happened. But what happened at Wardenclyffe that night changed the story forever. It was a spring night in 1903. Most people around Shoreham had already gone to sleep in their homes. That night, there was no major journalist at Wardenclyffe, no investor, and no one whom Tesla wanted to be a part of his experiment. Tesla first began checking the part under the tower that he had kept the most sensitive. The iron pipes installed underground went down to the water table. Every connection was carefully checked. Everything was ready. Now it was time to turn on the system. Tesla was standing near the main control switch. In front of him, the coils and machinery were ready. His idea was that one part of the energy would travel through the ground, while the dome on top of the tower would create another electrical field in the atmosphere. According to him, the Earth and the atmosphere could work together like a very large circuit. He looked toward his assistant and slowly gave a signal. The power was turned on. At first, only a low hum could be heard. Then the sound started getting louder. The copper coils inside the tower began to vibrate. A slight vibration could be felt in the floor. Static electricity started building up in the air, and small sparks began appearing on the nearby metal surfaces. Then suddenly, a bright stream of white-blue light rose from the top of the dome toward the sky. It was not just a momentary flash. The bright electrical glow continued for some time. The entire sky started to light up, and even people living far away in Shoreham saw the unusual light. But the real surprise was still left. It is said that in some homes and small buildings several miles away, lights suddenly turned on where there was no normal electricity connection. Tesla's assistant was watching all of this, while Tesla himself stood in front of the instruments, continuously checking the readings and calculations. Then the machine gauges suddenly started going beyond their normal limits. Telegraph operators began receiving complaints about disturbances in the signals. At some stations, the system started shutting down. The current coming back through the ground was increasing, and the coils were beginning to overheat. Smoke was also seen near one of the generators. Tesla immediately stepped toward the control lever. In one movement, he cut the power. The blue light disappeared. The vibration stopped. The sound of the machines went silent. For a few moments, there was such silence that it felt as if nothing huge had just happened there. Then Tesla slowly said, "It works." But his assistant felt more fear than happiness in his voice. He instructed her not to tell anyone anything and said that the next tests would have to be carried out with even more caution. He had no idea that that night, Tesla and his assistant were not the only ones watching the experiment. On the other side of the fence, several people were standing in the darkness, and they had been watching Wardenclyffe for quite some time. After turning off the power, Tesla started shutting down the control room. He thought that the night's experiment was now over. But then his assistant looked outside the tower. On the other side of the fence, near a line of trees, some people were standing. They were standing completely silent in the darkness. Their clothes were dark, and there were no identifying marks on them. The strangest thing was that they were not even trying to hide. It looked as if they had only one purpose: to watch. The assistant did not recognize them as any ordinary workers who were there. They were not journalists, and they were not people sent by Morgan, whom she already knew. The question was, then who were these people? At that time, they had no answer. But by the next morning, things became even stranger. Before any newspaper could report the news, a letter had already reached Tesla. It was said to be from one of Morgan's representatives. There was nothing in it congratulating him on the success of the experiment. Instead, it expressed concern. The concern was about what would happen if Tesla's system could spread such a large amount of energy that it became difficult to properly track, measure, or control it. And the story did not end there. Later, a claim also came forward that information about this experiment had already reached some people outside America. In other words, it was possible that people outside America were also watching Wardenclyffe that night. Some people believed that interest in this experiment had already developed at both domestic and foreign levels. But who exactly were the people standing near those trees is still not clear even today. One thing was certain. The night at Wardenclyffe was no longer just the night of a scientific experiment. Wardenclyffe was no longer a private project. The outside world had started watching it. After that night at Wardenclyffe, the situation started changing quickly. Soon after, the financial support coming from J.P. Morgan stopped. There was no long discussion, no new extension, and it did not seem like there was any attempt to keep the project running as before. As soon as the money stopped, the entire system started being affected. Tesla no longer had enough money to pay the salaries of his employees. Engineers and other workers slowly started leaving the place. The supply of necessary materials stopped, and the construction work almost came to a complete halt. The Wardenclyffe that Tesla wanted to make the foundation of a major technology of the future was now slowly becoming empty. But there was another thing in the story that was perhaps even more interesting than the funding stopping. Sometime after the money stopped, some officials started coming to Wardenclyffe. Different reasons were given for their visits. Somewhere it was a security inspection, somewhere rules related to patents, and somewhere inspections related to electricity regulations. From the outside, this could look like a normal government inspection. But according to the later statements of Tesla's assistant, their behavior did not seem normal at all. Some of them, without giving much introduction, went into areas where it was not easy for ordinary people, and even most employees, to enter. They looked at the machines, checked the equipment, and reached places where Tesla kept his most sensitive research. And this is where a new question appears in the story. If the project was shutting down only because of a lack of money, then why were these people so interested in the inside areas? Because the funding stopping was only the first blow. But after that, some things started being removed from Wardenclyffe, and keeping a complete account of what happened to them is still one of the biggest mysteries of the story. After the work stopped at Wardenclyffe, it was not just machines and an unfinished tower that remained there. Tesla's years of hard work were also still there. Then one day, large wooden crates started being seen leaving the place. Many questions were later raised about what was inside these crates. It was said that they contained precision equipment, tools specially made for Tesla, and some special components related to wireless energy. But the most important things were inside Tesla's own lab, his journals, technical drawings, and research notes. These were not just piles of paper. It was said that these documents contained important information related to those experiments, what frequencies were to be used, how to create an electrical connection with the ground, what the calculations were for transmitting energy through the atmosphere, and how receiver stations could be built in the future. In other words, if Tesla's entire dream was one day to deliver wireless energy around the world, then the complete map of that system could have been hidden in these papers. And this is where the biggest question arises. If these were just old and useless papers, then why was there a need to remove them? The matter seems even more mysterious because no clear public record of their removal appears to have come forward. No clear receipt, no detailed statement, and no clear information about where these things finally went. This also affected Tesla. In the following years, he continued working on small devices and his theories, but he never started a large project like Wardenclyffe again. There was also no major full power test or similar public demonstration seen again. Once, his assistant even asked him if he was going to restart the project. It is said that Tesla replied that he now knew that it worked, and perhaps this was the reason he stopped it. But the story of Wardenclyffe did not end here, because after Tesla's death, what happened to his papers made this mystery even deeper. The Wardenclyffe Tower was eventually shut down. In 1917, it was demolished, and the building that was once considered a symbol of the future slowly became a part of history. But Tesla's story did not end there. After Wardenclyffe, his financial condition continued to get worse. Instead of building large projects, he continued working on small experiments and his theories. Then, on January 7, 1943, Tesla died in room 3327 of a hotel in New York. After his death, one of the most important things was his scientific legacy. His notebooks, drawings, letters, technical papers, and materials related to unfinished inventions. During this time, American officials also took an interest in his belongings. At that time, a government system such as the Office of Alien Property Custodian existed, which was used during the war to control property owned by foreigners. In Tesla's case, records also exist of government examination and custody of his papers and belongings. FBI records also contain a file related to Tesla's writings and drawings acquired by the United States after his death. These papers also contained material related to another controversial idea of his, teleforce. Later, newspapers gave it names like death ray, while Tesla presented it as a kind of defensive particle beam technology. But for the story of Wardenclyffe, even more important were the papers related to his wireless energy experiments. Because now the question was not just what Tesla had built, the question was, what happened to the scientific information that remained with him after his death? Which documents were kept safe, which ones went to officials, and which information later disappeared from the records? These are the questions that made the mystery of Wardenclyffe deeper instead of bringing it to an end. Now the question becomes even bigger. After Tesla's death, his belongings were examined and a record of his papers was prepared. This included things like trunks, files, and technical documents. Today, the FBI also has old records related to Tesla, which mention writings and drawings acquired by the United States after his death. But some specific claims related to Wardenclyffe turned this story into a mystery. It is said that some technical papers were searched for, which may have contained information about the idea of sending energy through the Earth, calculations for transmitting energy through the atmosphere, circuit diagrams, field strength, and the conductivity of the ground. If such a complete technical record existed, it is not difficult to understand its importance, because these papers could have contained not just Tesla's theory, but also the information needed to rebuild the system. But one thing needs to be made clear here. It would not be right to say that these documents were stolen by some government. The FBI itself says about the old claims that its officials did not search Tesla's papers and that the FBI did not have those papers. So then, what is the mystery? The mystery is that the complete journey of Tesla's scientific legacy is still not simple and easy for the general viewer to follow. Which document went to whom? Which one survived in an archive? And which record appeared later? There are still many stories and claims about these questions, and perhaps the most interesting thing was even bigger than the documents. The people who had seen Wardenclyffe being built had seen the machines running and had worked with Tesla. Many of them later refused to talk about it. But one thing appears again and again in the story of Wardenclyffe: silence. Later, when some people tried to find the technicians and workers who had worked with Tesla, many of them avoided talking about the subject. One journalist also researched Tesla's wireless experiments for a long time, but before the story could come out, he withdrew his article. About the reason, he only said that he was under pressure, but he never clearly said who the pressure was coming from. After this, another claim appeared in the story: the alleged last recording of one of Tesla's assistants. It is said that before her death, she recorded her memories of that night in 1903. In this damaged recording, she reportedly talked about the light coming from the tower, the vibration of the ground, and the distant lights. But independent confirmation of this recording is extremely difficult, so it would not be right to treat it as solid evidence. And then comes the most interesting part: the alleged scientific data. According to the story, in later years, attempts were made to connect some telegraph and electromagnetic records with the Wardenclyffe event. There were also claims of unusual readings in compasses and other instruments. But there is no strong scientific evidence connecting a specific night in 1903 to Wardenclyffe that could prove Tesla really activated the entire Earth like a huge electrical circuit. The same applies to modern measurements. Finding slight electromagnetic activity at a place today is not, by itself, proof that it is leftover resonance from Tesla's experiment. Such readings can also come from nearby electrical infrastructure and other natural or human-made sources. So, what does this whole story actually mean? On one side, Tesla's real vision was to go beyond wireless communication and attempt to transmit electrical energy on a large scale. Wardenclyffe was a part of that ambition. On the other side, there is no solid evidence available today for the claim that during a mysterious night in 1903, the entire system was run and accidentally created some huge global resonance. So, three possibilities come forward. It is possible that real electromagnetic effects happened during Tesla's experiments, but later stories greatly exaggerated them. It is possible that some unusual readings really happened, but Tesla did not correctly understand their cause. And the third possibility is the one that keeps this story interesting even today. Perhaps some phenomenon happened at Wardenclyffe that was not fully understood at that time. But we do not have a definite answer to this, because perhaps the biggest story of Wardenclyffe is not what Tesla actually built. The real question is what he saw that night, and how much we still know about it today. If you like such unheard stories and mysterious truths, then subscribe to the channel now so you can watch the next story first.